Welcome to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast, where stories bloom from local flower fields and home gardens. I'm your host, Jennifer Galizia of the Flowering Farmhouse. I'm a backyard gardener turned flower farmer located in Hood River, Oregon. Join us for heartfelt journeys shared by flower farmers and backyard gardeners. Each episode is like a vibrant garden, cultivating wisdom and joy through flowers. From growing your own backyard garden to supporting your local flower farmer, the Backyard Bouquet is your fertile ground for heartwarming tales and expert cut flower growing advice. All right, flower friends, grab your gardening gloves, garden snips, or your favorite vase because it's time to let your backyard bloom. Welcome to a very special episode of the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. Today, we're rejoined by a dear friend and past guest, Marryn Mathis from the Farmhouse Flower Farm. Many of you may also know our guest as the Sweet Pea Queen. Marryn has captivated us before with her deep knowledge and passion for sweet peas, and she's back today for a wonderful reason, to celebrate the launch of her first book, Sweet Pea School. For years, Marryn has been teaching the art of growing sweet peas through her popular online workshops, and she's now compiled her extensive knowledge into a beautiful and informative guide. The book is filled with everything from the charming history of sweet peas to practical tips for cultivating vibrant blooms, all illustrated with stunning photography from her Farmhouse Flower Farm in Washington. We're going to dive into her journey from online instructor to published author, explore the inspiration behind her book, and of course, get some insider tips directly from the Sweet Pea Queen herself. Marryn, it's so great to have you back on the show, and congratulations on this incredible milestone.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was quite the introduction.
It was. I felt like I was getting tongue-tied there.
I loved it.
Well, oh my gosh, thanks for coming back on. I know your life is so busy right now. How does it feel? You are a published author.
I still am in shock over it all, honestly. It's just, you work for, it was this child of mine almost, for the last 4 years now.
Wow.
And just to finally see it, coming to fruition and the first copies arriving. And now I'm not just looking at digital versions, I'm actually feeling the pages, and it, you're holding it in your hands and it smells like a book, and it's just, the reality is really hitting. So it's an emotional thing, but I'm so excited.
I had no idea that you've been working on this for 4 years.
Yeah.
That's
cool. From the time that it, that little, seed was planted in my head, from my workshops to now.
So let's go back to 4 years ago. What made you decide to write a book?
Well, actually, it was one of my students, actually a couple of my students. I was teaching the Sweet Pea School in-person workshops at that time. And after we were sitting around after class, talking, and one of them, was like, "Have you ever thought of writing a book?" And in that moment, I was like, "Oh no, not me," kind of thing. But so I just kind of dismissed it a little bit. But it just, the thought, once she said that, and I just allowed myself that time to really think about it, I was like, wow, I could really reach, a lot more people with a book. And I had received so many, great comments about, my course and my class and all those kinds of things. And when I started teaching the classes, I thought I could share my passion for sweet peas. And that's what I just wanted to share my love of flowers with people. But the more that I shared my love of flowers with people, the more it filled my cup in a way that I would have never honestly imagined in a million years. And so, when I started growing flowers, I just envisioned the flowers, right? I never envisioned, teaching a class or even writing a book, but just the energy that I received from that, I'm like, okay, all right. And then just pushing myself, out of my comfort zone and, in the writing process and all those kinds of things. So so it started with my workshops, and it just kind of blossomed into something, bigger than I would have ever imagined.
That's awesome. we never know when we sow a seed how
Yeah.
big it could sometimes grow and the ripple effects that it can have, which is so apparent with what you've done here. I mean, your first sweet pea class was when?
2020.
In 2020. And how many
Hmm.
people came to that first class? Do you remember?
The first class, I think it was around 40 to 45. And I was so nervous because it was my first time, getting in front of a group of people. And I had my notebook next to me and all of my props and all the things. And, um, I thought, okay, this will just be, like an hour long. And bless their hearts, they stuck with me through the whole thing. It was like 2.5 hours,
Wow.
all about sweet peas. And after I was done, I turned to my friend and I was like, that was the most invigorating, amazing experience that I've ever experienced, just to feel the energy in that room and to see everyone's excitement, for these flowers that I love so much. Yeah, like I said, it just fed my soul in a way that I can't put it into words. And it just kept kept growing over the years. So
I love it. It's kind of like when you give a bouquet to someone. I almost feel selfish thinking that I'm feeding more of myself and my soul by giving that bouquet because it feels so good, that gesture of sharing those flowers. And I know as a teacher also that it feels that same way. You get those same, I don't even know the right word for it, but just those like feel good vibes in your body of like you're doing something good and you get to share this incredible thing with other people.
oh, yeah, the giving is such an amazing, amazing feeling, and no matter what, aspect it is, whether it's a bouquet or, book or, whatever, you're putting something out into the world, and just that feeling that, you get in return, they're getting something tangible, but just that feeling that you get in return is pretty awesome.
Yes. Well, especially with flowers. I mean, seeing people be able to grow something, and maybe that's what it is, the fact that we are literally getting to grow something and nurture it, that it feeds, that's the part of, I guess, feeding the soul. That the teaching makes you feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, and as all these copies are arriving and I'm getting ready to ship all the books out, I just keep thinking about how many people this is going to teach, how many people this is going to reach, how like you said, the ripple effect, they're going to give their flowers away. Those
Mhm.
flowers that person receives is going to, make their day and, can just make a difference in somebody's life. So you never know, like, what inspires them. So yeah, it's pretty amazing to think of, just the widespread love that a book can, reach a lot of people.
And probably so many more than you'll ever know.
Uh, I hope so.
I'm sure so. Well, you have been a flower farmer and you grow a lot of flowers, not just sweet peas. Tell us, why a book on sweet peas? Or why a class on sweet peas, I guess, even going back to 2020.
Well, so looking back, when I was a little girl and my grandma, had told me all about sweet peas. And, she was the mother of four boys. And so, her house was, full of like Boy Scouts and all the boy things. And not a lot of flowers. And because of where they lived, she wasn't able to grow them. But she had little touches in her handkerchiefs and, she would tell me, little stories about them and stuff. And I mean, it wasn't something that I dwelled on in my adolescence, but when I, started my journey with flowers, it clicked, right? And so my first inkling was, to sow sweet peas. And those were the first seeds that I had sown as a budding flower farmer at the time. And so then, fast forward a few months after I'd sown those seeds and, I'm looking at the first flowers and it made it all connected for me. I understood what she had been telling me so many years ago and, as a little girl. And so I just absolutely loved them. And it was just an amazing full circle moment for me, to be honest with you. And so I couldn't grow enough of them. So I started with a row and a half my first season. Then I went to 5 rows. And then you kind of know the story. But they just have my heart. They just have my heart. They're all so different. Um, but yet so similar. And so many people have such an amazing connection with them that there's just something magical about sweet peas. And they're so rich in history. So many people love them. They're so relatable. And every year I fall more and more and more in love with them. And even when I feel like I can't love them more than I do, this season I'm preparing to fall even more in love with them. So, but yeah, they're an amazing flower that I can't get enough of.
You grow more sweet peas than any other flower. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I would say, I would say so. Yeah, we grew 32,000 sweet pea plants last year.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a lot. Do you know how many you're going to grow this year?
No, we're still sowing.
Okay.
So, I always have a really detailed plan going into the season. And then by the end of seed sowing, I'm like, okay, maybe just a few more, or, oh, maybe I'll try this one, or I find seeds of, a certain variety that I haven't grown before. So, I always allow myself a little bit of wiggle room, but, yeah, I will definitely be at 32,000, if not more this year.
Wow. You're
Yeah.
lucky you have a big field.
Yeah. I keep telling my husband, can you give me a few more rows? Can you give me a few more rows? Can I get a few more rows?
Well, it seems like he's pretty good at complying with that.
Yeah, he doesn't mind. I mean, they're his favorite flower too.
Oh, I
So
love that.
that's one of our favorite things to do, during the season when they're blooming is, that's our nightly rituals. We'll, walk around through the sweet peas and stuff. So it's fun to see them, through his eyes as well. And it's not just me that's enamored with him. He loves them just as much as I do.
I think that's one of the neat things about actually getting to touch and see and feel flowers is that it's like growing up, I feel like girls were given flowers for certain things. But when you introduce anyone to flowers, everyone that comes in contact with flowers, I feel like becomes enamored with them because how can you not? Like, I feel like I can smell your sweet peas just through the audio here when you talk about 32,000 sweet peas.
Yeah,
Can
it's pretty incredible.
can we go a little bit back in time? You mentioned that they have a strong history. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of sweet peas?
Sure. So they were founded by a Sicilian monk
Oh,
named Francisco Cupani. And a lot of people, correlate sweet peas with being English, right? Because
yeah.
that's where a lot of them stem from. But they actually came from the hills of Sicily.
No way.
Yeah, which was really incredible to read and, discover in my research. But, yeah, so I had always thought that they were, English flowers, but they actually weren't. And so the variety that he discovered all those years ago, was actually a wild sweet pea. So it's very different than the sweet peas that we know of as today. So it was a wild sweet pea, very short, and very different than, your standard sweet peas. There's so many different species of sweet peas out there. So, we are all very familiar with the Spencers and the, modern grandifloras and all of the grandifloras and all of those guys. But there's so many different types of sweet peas that, fall under that sweet pea umbrella. But basically what he did was he saved some seed from those wild sweet peas and he sent them to different, I guess you could call them flower friends at the time, back in the 1700s, but to different gardens in Europe. And that's where, the history of sweet peas actually started. And so those seeds, over the course of the years were, sported and mutated and all those kinds of things. But it wasn't until like the 1800s that they really started hybridizing and playing around with the breeding of sweet peas to what we know of as today.
Interesting. So
So,
were they originally used as a cut flower or a garden when he found these wild ones? What did they do with
I
them back then?
back then they just grew on a hillside and they were
Mhm.
very short, so they weren't, what you and I would consider as cut flowers. But he was very intrigued by them. Um, from what I wish I could go back in time and actually talk to him. Wouldn't that be a cool
Oh
interview
gosh.
to to just really like pick his brain and see like what he actually thought of, these flowers that he found just on a walk through the hills. But so yeah, so he just saved those seeds because he was a botanist. And so he was really involved in, nature and flowers and plants and all those kinds of things. And so he just saved the seed and shipped them off to some friends, and the rest is history.
Wow. So in the 1800s is when they started being cultivated for cut flowers.
Yes.
And did that start in England, or where did that first come about? Do you know?
That came from, so there was a man named Eckford, Henry Eckford, and he was actually from Scotland but moved to England. And a lot of his breeding efforts, I mean, he's still known for, some of those varieties that he bred in his very, very early days. And so he kind of like what they call the godfather of sweet peas, so to speak. So a lot of his early work, from the late 1800s to early 1900s, and then the breeding efforts have been passed down. Um, Roger Parsons is definitely definitely high on the list of sweet pea breeders. Dr. Keith Hammett, Phil Johnson, from English Sweet Peas. So it's just amazing to, I was actually lucky enough to have Roger walk me through the breeding process when I was able to visit his garden in 2022. And so that was a very, very fun experience, just to, be right down in the flowers with him and showing me, how new varieties are bred and created. So
That's so amazing that you got
yeah,
to experience that and meet Roger Parsons in person.
he is so lovely. Just such an amazing, just not only friendly, but just so willing to share his knowledge, and just, here I am just coming over from America, and he welcomed me with open arms and, gave me a tour around the farm and showed me how to breed sweet peas and how they, all of the things. And it was just a lovely afternoon. And yeah, I'll forever be grateful, for him and his, knowledge. But yeah, just his, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm totally drawing a blank, but I mean, just his contributions to, the flower. I mean, it's so many varieties that Roger has bred over the years. Like I said, Dr. Keith Hammett as well has some amazing varieties. I wish I could get my hands on more of those from New Zealand, but yeah, just those guys have just been working on, creating new varieties for so many years, so many years. So, for me to just kind of dabble into that, I can't wait to see kind of what the future holds, for us here on the farm, but we'll see. Time will tell.
So I've got so many questions for you about the breeding process. Is it like dahlias where the bees can help you pollinate them, or is it very scientific?
It's very scientific. I mean, we're talking tweezers and, you've got to get them, uh, to honestly, they're in bud stage at the point where you want to cross them. So
Interesting.
it's very, very delicate, very, very intricate. And then, just making that cross and then waiting for, the seed to develop and collecting the seed. And, I mean, you're just talking one pod, for the next season, and then growing that out and observing it and, seeing if those what comes out of it, and, seeing those traits and what, is it going to be a Spencer? Is it going to be a Grandiflora? What is, what are the parents, all of those observations that need to be made. So it takes years and years for a sweet pea variety to come to market.
And I think the last time you were on the podcast, you hinted at that you were doing a little bit of dabbling in the breeding yourself.
Just a little bit.
How many
Just a
years
little bit. Time will tell. Time
have
will
you had a
tell.
chance to see any bloom that you have crossed?
Not yet. Not
Not
yet.
yet. Okay.
Yeah, so I did some crosses this year, so we'll see, what those crosses, what comes out of those crosses, but fingers crossed it's something good.
That's exciting. So you probably have to be very selective and very particular on what you're crossing,
Right.
because if you're
Yeah.
only getting one seed pod, you might get what, 2 to 4 seeds?
Yeah, you could get 2, you could get 8, you could, some, you just never know how many seeds you're gonna get out of a pod, but yeah, it could be little as 1, or you could go, to all this effort and not even get anything, you just don't know. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
It's a number, well, I'm sure it's a numbers game, but it's a much longer game. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't even think of any analogy of what it would be like. Because dahlia is the great thing, I think, why so many of us can do it is because the bees help us. And especially on the open pollinated ones, you might get 40 seeds out of one seed pod.
Right. Yeah, it's a very intricate process. And one that I was very intimidated to start, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start. I'm just going to go with it. If it produces something, great. If it doesn't produce anything, you learn from your mistakes, and we're just going to go with it. So we'll see what I came up with this year.
Well, it's exciting that you're bringing the breeding to the U.S. Are there any breeders in the U.S. currently of sweet peas?
Oh goodness. Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are out there, I mean, it's just, I'm sure there's people that are dabbling in it, and, making crosses and stuff like that. They're just not saying anything.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, there's gotta be somebody in the, in the US that's doing it. I'm not aware of one.
They're just so popular right now. I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like so many people are trying to grow sweet peas in their gardens, which before I jump to that, I wanted to ask you, sticking with Roger Parsons real fast.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say this last year that you got to help him name a few varieties?
So I actually, purchased the naming rights for 2 of his varieties so that I could name them after my grandma's.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
yeah. So, Beverly Ann and Ada Marie are both new varieties that he came out with in late 2024. And those are named after my grandma. Yeah.
So are you able to grow those on your farm?
Yeah. I have both of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there potential that those could eventually be on your seed cell?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. So I've already got, those are already, I've did some fall sowing with those varieties just, to see if I can beef those guys up and get some more seed out of them. But that's the plan. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
Can you
We'll
describe
see.
what they look like to us?
Yes. So Beverly Ann is a really beautiful icy blue. It's an early flowering variety. And it's a really it sparkles in the sunlight. It's very, very, very pale. But I'm just totally enamored with that variety. And I was actually able to share that variety with my grandma before she passed away. So that was
Oh,
pretty special. So she got to see her flower.
I love
So
that.
that was, yeah, that was a really special time. And then Ada Marie is a really deep eggplant purple. It's a Spencer variety as well. And yeah, I wasn't able to get as much seed of Ada Marie as I was of Beverly Ann. So I'll definitely, fingers crossed, I'll have Beverly Ann for sale, but Ada Marie, I'll probably have to work on that one for another year or two.
Okay. Well, that's really exciting.
So, and there's pictures of them in my book.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Do you highlight individual varieties then in the book?
Yeah. I highlight so the whole back portion of of my book is in rainbow order.
You
Shock
love
and
your
awe.
rainbows.
I know. So it's in rainbow order. And then we also have, we have a featured variety within every colorway. And then we also have supporting varieties. So I have my favorite variety within that color palette. And then we have 6 supporting characters for each color. So yeah, very exciting.
That's awesome. So we're saying how or not just flowers in general are gaining popularity. It feels like these days with gardeners, but sweet peas in particular, I feel like are having kind of this moment in the spotlight, which is perfect timing for your book. Can anyone grow sweet peas?
So I think there's a huge misconception, out there that not everyone can grow them. And there are some, environments to where, that are really warm to where it would be definitely, challenging to grow them. But I think, given the right information and the right varieties and the right timing can make such a huge difference in the success of your sweet peas. So let's say, you're down in the South where it gets really hot really quickly. You're definitely going to want to fall sow your sweet peas, and you're going to want to grow those early multiflora varieties so you can actually get a leg up on that heat and kind of beat Mother Nature at her own game, I like to say. So a lot of people just think, they see these Spencers and they they get the seeds and they start the seeds, and then they're not successful because they're living in a more challenging environment. And so they kind of give up on sweet peas. Whereas they started their seeds at the right time, grew those early flowering varieties, they would be, a lot more successful with those. So that was another, goal with my book was, really teaching people, how to grow them so that they can, really, you know, experience sweet peas for themselves. Because so many people are like, I got, my plants look great. They, grew great, but I just didn't get any flowers, because it just got too hot.
Mhm.
So just because they like it cool. So there's definitely some more challenging environments, but, sweet peas can be grown in a lot of different environments for sure.
What environments do they thrive in? Like, is there an ideal growing climate for them?
We're pretty lucky here in the Pacific Northwest, and again, England as well. We have similar climates. We pretty much have the ideal climate for, growing sweet peas. So we're, very, very lucky in that aspect. But, like I said, if what it's all in the timing. It's
Mhm.
all in the timing. And I think, a lot of people kind of, tend to get caught up in social media because we're seeing what other people are doing, but we're not seeing like, their growing conditions and, what growing zone are they in? Are they in an unheated hoop house? Are they putting their stuff outside? There's so many different variables, when growing your sweet peas, that, a lot of people don't consider. So I really, try to tell people, don't get caught up in what you're seeing. Concentrate on what you have available to you, what zone you're in, and what is going to be successful for you.
I think that's such great advice because, especially this time of year, I mean, we're pre recording this in end of January. And like, if I go on social media right now, there are so many people sowing plants or even planting them out in their fields, and it's 19 degrees for me. And
Right.
so when I look online, I'm like, I'm so behind and I feel discouraged. But really, especially with building out a new farm right now, I can't do any of that. And I'd be just killing the plants and wasting my time if I was sowing things now. I mean, sweet
Right.
peas, I could probably, if I was able to grow them this year, I'll definitely be buying sweet peas from you next year once I have some space built out for them.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so easy to get, like for Instagram, for example, you see that, people are showing like their greenhouses and they're full of these seedlings and stuff like that. But really take into account, are they heating the greenhouse? Do you have a greenhouse? What zone are they in? When are they going to be planting them out in the field? I mean, even for me and you, I mean, we're, pretty much in the same zone, but I even myself, I caught myself feeling this morning like, oh, I'm behind. I'm not behind at all. It just sweet peas are the only thing that I'm sowing right now, and that I'm totally on track. But it's easy to get, caught up in that. But also that can set you up for success or failure, right? So if you're
mhm.
starting your stuff way too soon, that's not good. And if you're starting your stuff way too late, that's not good either. So really knowing your zone is just crucial to being successful with any flower, really.
Yeah, that's great advice. It was so good to hear you say that you haven't started anything other than the sweet peas either, because that makes me feel like I'm not behind because I almost can't even look on the stories right now because I'm like, oh, everyone's sewing and I have nothing going right now.
Yeah, no, I've only done sweet peas. Oh, and I've got some trays of larkspur. But other than that, I mean, every year I tell myself I'm going to get on the hardy annual train. I'm going to, do stuff in the fall. And it just, it gets away from me and I never do. And I'm just like, you know what? It's totally fine. It's going to, don't get caught up. Just concentrate on what you're doing. And, everything's great.
Well, I think that's such a good reminder too, is that when you focus on what you're doing, you can stay on track because, like for you, you grow for seed production now mostly. And
Right.
you have two big crops. Am I correct?
Yes.
Dahlias and sweet peas. So you probably don't need to be sowing 1,000. I'm trying to even think what I might be sowing right now, like Sweet William, for example,
Yeah.
because you're not going to be growing and selling to wholesale as much as you were previously now that your business model has changed. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So, we grow mostly for seed in anything that we grow here on the farm, whether it's cuts or, sweet peas. Dahlias we're mostly growing for the tubers. So yeah, it kind of takes the pressure off of that a little bit. I
Uh-huh.
mean, I still have a really rigid seed sowing schedule, But especially at this time of the year, it's so early, and it's way, for us anyways, it's way too early to start any of that stuff, unless you've overwintered things, or, you have a greenhouse, or, whatever you have at your disposal. So yeah, so I'm just keeping my eye on the prize, and just kind of, I don't want to deter from, I know what we have in store for us in 2025, and I don't want to deter from that plan. Right. So it's just, if I can just keep my blinders on, everybody's kind of got their own thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just keeping my blinders on, and just, I don't want to be like, granted, like, you see somebody's, story or whatever, and you're just like, oh, that's cool. But then, that kind of I don't want to deviate. I've got way too much going on in 2025. So yeah, so I'm good where we're at. We're good. We're good.
That's really good advice. It kind of leads me to my next question for you, because you mentioned about not deviating and having a plan. For those that are listening to our conversation today that do want to grow sweet peas this year, how do they go about choosing the right varieties for their climate and their garden? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah. So depending on what your growing zone is. So if you are in, I would say 9 and 10, you've probably missed your window. Well, actually, I'm not going to say probably, you've missed your window. Just because for you guys even to be able to grow sweet peas, they need to be, sown in the fall. And you need to grow those early flowering varieties. Now, when you get into the kind of the 8A and 8B, which is crazy for us because you and I are you 8B?
I'm 7, and with my
Oh,
new
you're
farm, I might
7?
even be closer to 6.
Okay. So we're 8B here, but Texas is also 8B. And
Mm.
I'm like, you can't even, I mean, the environments are completely different. But if you follow the 8B rule, we can fall sow, we can early winter sow, we can, late winter sow, pretty much, they need to sow in the fall, and they need to grow the early flowering varieties as well. Now, if you're zone 3, you can't fall sow at all. And you're going to have to, sow your stuff a lot later than us. And also, it really depends on, are you growing them in a greenhouse? Are you growing them, are you going to direct sow? All those different variables as to when you're actually starting your seeds. Can you give them a little bit of protection if you're in zone 3? Or are you going to direct sow them? Because if you're in zone 3, you're not going to be able to direct sow them, until
Mhm.
later in the season. So it's really knowing your zone specifically. And then once you know your zone and what your timing looks like, then if you're, in those hotter climates, I would definitely recommend growing some of those early flowering varieties, just so that, like I said earlier, because they only take 10 to 11 hours of sunlight to induce the bloom cycle, versus your standard Spencer. So that's, after talking to, a lot of my students, a lot of them haven't been successful because, their timing was right, but they actually grew the Spencer varieties instead of the early flowerings. And so their
Mm.
vines were beautiful, but they never got flowers before they started petering out. Whereas if they would have grown the early flowering varieties, this is a lot of information.
No, this
if,
is great.
if they would have started with, the early flowering varieties, then, they would have definitely seen flowers and been more successful. So it's all about, knowing what varieties are going to be, successful for you, knowing your zone, and also, kind of playing with, I like to say, if you do get those hotter climates, or, you want to extend your season a little bit, think about giving them some afternoon shade. Sweet peas can have full sun, but also if you live in one of those hotter climates where you're going to get, a lot of afternoon heat, see if you can find them a location where they can, handle some of those, some of that shade, and give them a reprieve from the heat. And it will definitely extend your season. They will thank you for it. So, like I said, there's a lot of different, variables that come into play with, your environment, the different varieties, and toying around with, what works for you. And so that was a lot of my, also a lot of my thought behind the book was, trying to help people be more successful with their flowers so they wouldn't give up on them.
That's great advice, because it can be discouraging. Like, I think
Yeah.
my first time trying to grow them, I want to say it was probably May that I sowed the seeds, which was way too late.
Right.
And when you just said the varieties, I'm pretty sure they were Spencer varieties that I sowed that very first year. So no wonder I had terrible success. I had some greenery and then the aphids attacked them and I don't know if I got any flowers that season. So that makes sense. So if someone is listening right now that's in growing zones 9 or 10 and it's late winter now, if they've already bought seeds, can they store those seeds till next year?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sweet pea seeds, if they're stored correctly, will last years in a freezer. So I just tell people if you've already got seeds, don't start them, if you're in zones 9 or 10 and it's way too late for you to start. Don't waste your seeds. Put them in a Ziploc baggie and put them in your freezer and just forget about them until October or November. And then start your seeds because you're going to be way more successful and you're not going to waste your seeds. But yeah, they will last a really long time if they're stored correctly.
That's good to know. So my seeds that I've saved from my last farm, I could put in my freezer and
Oh, yeah.
plant some of those next year. I've got like 4 or 5 varieties, so I'll need to add a few more varieties.
Well, and I always tell people, save your seeds. Sweet pea seeds are really easy to save. It's an investment in next year's garden, right? So if you have all of these seeds, don't feel like you have to use them that first season. Whatever you don't use, put it in the freezer and you can use it the next time.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I'm sure that lots of people that are listening today are either wanting to improve their sweet pea growing or are eager to grow them for the first time. Can you go over what are some of the common misconceptions about growing sweet peas?
I think the number one mistake that I see people making is they start them too warm and they don't give them enough light. So many people that I talk to have these, really tall, lanky sweet peas. And with the sweet peas, slow and steady wins the race, right? You want your plants to be stocky and you want them to be short. You do not want them to be, you don't want them to be basketball players. So, you're just kind of setting them up for, failure. You want to start them off on the right foot. And I think as a human being, it's just kind of human nature to want to nurture, these plants. We're tucking our seeds in the soil and all of those things and, keeping them warm. Sweet peas do not like it warm. That is the number one misconception I think, with sweet peas is people start them way too hot. I've seen people put them on heat mats. They're under these hot grow lights and these, warm grow rooms and all this kind of stuff. Sweet peas like it cool. And so 50 to 55 degrees is ideal for germination. And then as soon as you see, they look kind of like little snake heads when they, pop through the soil, right? These little
Mhm.
tiny serpents. And so as soon as I see that, they've reached the soil level, I get them out into my unheated greenhouse. And that's where they grow all, the rest of the winter or the rest of so I have 2 different sowing. So I do my fall sowing and then I do my next round, which is what's happening now on the farm. But as soon as they germinate, they go out into my unheated greenhouse and that is where they stay. I do not put frost cloth on them. I let them grow cold and they are just fine. So for example, last year we got down to single digits and it was, low teens. I put frost cloth on them then in my unheated greenhouse, but it was so cold that they literally froze in their seed trays. The plants were like literally crunchy. And within 2 hours of, I was kind of like this devil on one shoulder and like the angel on the other, right? So I had, the teacher in me was telling me, it's going to be fine. Your plants are going to be fine. But, that grower in you just instantly kind of panics when you see frozen plants, right? But within a few hours, they were right as rain. And you would have never known that they were frozen, just a few hours before that. So grown cold, sweet peas are such stronger plants. Their root systems are stronger. The cell walls are, of the leaves and of the plant itself are so much stronger. So you'll be way more successful when you grow your sweet peas cold. So I know that goes kind of against everything when we're, doing all these, starting tomatoes and just all of these different plants, that need to be warm. Sweet peas are definitely different in the aspect where they do not need to be warm. They actually like it cool.
What about the water? Do they have to be soaked in water? I mean, you see so many people putting like glass jars on their countertops and each variety is labeled in cups. That's not.
No. In fact, it's so funny because when I see that on Instagram, I'm like, inside, I'm like, no, don't soak your seeds. Now, it's a huge topic in the sweet pea world, to soak or not to soak. Now, for people that are just religious about soaking, I'm not poo-pooing on the soaking at all. If that works for you, that's great. But it's an unnecessary step for me. And if, when I'm growing 32,000 plants, like if I can just put a seed in the dirt, give it a good drink and it's done, like I can skip that step, right? And not only is it unnecessary because, there's this, common thought process that because sweet pea seeds have a really thick shell, that they need to be soaked in order to soften the shell and you get faster germination that way. It actually reduces the germination rate and can also introduce bacteria and fungus to your seeds. So, like I said, if there's been studies that have been done about it, all those kinds of things. So if I'm work smarter, not harder. So if I can, like I said earlier, if I can just put a seed in the dirt, I'm going to do it. So, but like I said, there's people that are just, it's always worked for them. I'm not saying, that you to change that, I guess I should say, but I personally don't soak my seeds. Never have. So, yeah, it's easier that way. And it's, you can skip a step. So, yeah, that's my thought on that.
Well, 32,000 seeds. I can't even imagine how many jars that would take up on your countertops at your house.
Yeah. I've learned that like I said, I've posted about it in my Instagram before. I have pretty strong feelings about not soaking. Some people have pretty strong feelings about soaking. So I just, whatever works for you, that's just kind of my thing. And, if people want to know how I do it, I don't soak. And, like I said, whatever works for you.
Well, I know I took your advice, and the last time I grew sweet peas, I didn't soak them, and I had great germination, and it saved a step. And I'm like, as a busy farmer and a mom,
Yeah.
if I can eliminate a step, I'm all for it if I'm going to have the
Right.
same success rates.
Right.
So,
And with sweet peas, you actually, a lot of people think, like I said earlier, that soaking the seeds will actually speed up the germination, but slow and steady wins the race in sweet peas. Like you don't want to rush anything, right? Ideal 10 to 14 days is when you'll see germination with sweet pea seeds. There's some that will see germination in, they're like, I've soaked and I've seen germination in, 3 days. And then they're sending me photos and their seedlings are like, this tall and lanky and, they're going to put them outside and they're just going to get wind whipped and not be successful. So short and stocky, you want your plants short and stocky, and slow and steady wins the race.
that's good advice. I love that. What about pinching them? I've been seeing a lot of videos lately of people pinching them to multiply.
Yeah. So if you fall sow your sweet peas, you actually do not have to pinch them. They will naturally branch on their own, and when they're grown cold, they'll do all of that for you. The thought process behind pinching is that you want to speed up, especially if you're not sowing until February or whatever. You would definitely want to pinch your plants at that time. So fall sowing, you don't have to pinch. If you're going to plant them any other time, definitely pinch your plants. Now, one of the ways that you can also multiply your stock. So for anybody that, received King's ransom this year specifically, that is a pretty, hot sweet pea right now. But if you can get more bang for your buck by taking cuttings of sweet peas. And it's really easy to do. You just take your cuttings from pinching them, put them in a little, bottle of water and let that stem soak in that water. And you'll see within, I would say 10 to 12 days, you should start to see roots. And then just plant those in the dirt and you can multiply your stock really easily and inexpensively. And it's a great thing to do.
Wait, so you're just cutting it, putting it in a cup of water, and then when the roots start forming, there's no guessing. You can see the roots.
You can see the roots. Yep.
Okay.
Just put it, yeah, you put it just, you can use just any little jar that you have, like a, tiny little bud vase or anything like that. Just take your pinchings and then put them in water. And yeah, you'll see the roots start growing in 10 to 12 days. And then you can just go ahead and plant those in soil. And, you've doubled your stock just like that. Really
Amazing.
easy to do. Yeah.
Now, if only dahlias were that easy.
I know. Yeah, no, sweet peas are really, really easy. So like I said, if you get your hands on, like King's Ransom, Juliet, any varieties that, are really hard to find, it's a no-brainer, right? You just, when you pinch them, you take those cuttings, put them in water, and then just, plant those when it's time.
Thank you for that tip. What about, because I know most people listening to this podcast like to make bouquets. What flowers do you like to grow that bloom about the same time as sweet peas that you can use in arrangements together?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so early flowering varieties will bloom at about the same time as Mother's Day, usually. So you've got, peonies, ranunculus. I'm totally drawn,
I put you on the
all of those.
spot here.
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to envision one of my arrangements. Just all of those like May type flowers, like geum, columbine. If got anemones, if those are planted outside, just, yeah. So you can put those in with those. And then there's out in the field, July is like prime time, sweet pea time. So from the beginning of July till I would say about the third week of July, they are just, primo, ideal. Now for us, that's when they start kind of starting to set seed. I would say the late third week, early fourth week, end of July. So they start to kind of wear a little bit just because I hardly ever cut my sweet peas. The only time that I ever cut my sweet peas is for, if I need a photo for our website. But other than that, I don't cut our sweet pea plants just because, we're growing for seed. But they are cut and come again. So for, a lot of other people that are continuously cutting their flowers, they're continually, regenerating themselves. So, I mean, you'll get anything that's blooming, anything that's in your garden in July into August.
So you could have them with dahlias even.
Oh yeah. So there's definitely, like last year we had 12 rows in the last time you were up to the farm. So
Yeah.
where we started in the reds, like those first 12 rows were all sweet peas this year. So I had, my purples. So I actually started my rainbow and my dahlia field backwards this year so that the purple dahlias were budded up with the purple sweet peas.
Oh, wow.
And I had blooms at the same time. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. So
are you going to do that again this year?
We'll see. I'm trying to figure out, I mean, honestly, I've always really sheltered my sweet peas. They're tucked, on the side of my barn. They're behind a fence, just all those things just because they're my babies, right? And I've just been so nervous about them. So I've never put them out into the main field until this last season. And I was completely enamored with them being out in the main field this year. It was just, I thought people stopped by the farm a lot just to look at the dahlias. There were 10 times as many people that stopped by to look at the sweet peas. My favorite was one of those vans from one of our local nursing homes.
Oh.
And it was the sweetest thing, Jen. They literally parked on the side of the road and they opened the doors and it was just, all these little old ladies that were in there and they were just completely just tickled to see so many sweet peas. It was the best thing. But yeah, I will never not grow the sweet peas out in the main field again. It was, I'm sorry, dahlias, but I had to push the dahlias down a little bit. But yeah, it was absolutely amazing being out in the field. So, so we'll see what what this year entails.
And let's just clarify, you're not open to the public to just come walk through your fields. So they were seeing through the fence.
Yeah.
The sweet peas just randomly showing up.
Yeah, and I felt so bad because I was doing something else in the greenhouse, so by the time I saw them, they had been there a little while, and so then when I went out there, they had to get back and, couldn't stay,
Oh,
but had I known, I mean, I would have just, moved heaven and earth to be able to accommodate them, but it was the sweetest thing, and so, it was fun to hear, their stories about, sweet peas and stuff, growing up, but, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I bet those would have been some amazing stories to hear too.
Oh, that's why I was so bummed. I was like, you guys need to come back. So they're gonna come back, this year. So
Oh,
yeah, we'll be able to host them again. But
I love that.
yeah, I mean, stories like that, that's honestly the unexpected is has been just the biggest gift in my journey with flowers. My book was unexpected, teaching classes was unexpected, sharing my love of flowers. When I started growing flowers, I wanted to do farmers markets and weddings and, those kinds of things. And I don't do any of that anymore. It's just, it's been a real, a real joy seeing everything kind of unfold for us.
What do you think has been the most surprising thing in your journey that you've least expected?
The book for sure.
Really?
The book, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, to get me to write a book report in high school, I mean, that did not happen. English was not my strong suit, but, so that's why when my student said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" It was instant terror, just the thought. And then once I kind of simmered on it a little bit, I was like, "You know what? You know what? I'm let's see where this thing takes me." And there was so much energy and so much, great feedback from the classes because, the in-person classes turned into online classes.
Mhm.
And so I've been able to reach so many more people online and teach, to people that have attended from all over the world. And now, we're taking that and turning it into a book and, it's going global. So yeah, that has been the biggest surprise by far. And just seeing how much, um, it just excitement and much it fills my cup just to share my love of flowers, with people, not just the flowers themselves, but just, my knowledge and just my love for them. Um, yeah, it's, been good for the soul. That's, that's a great way to put it.
Well, I'm so excited for you. I would love to know, have there been any challenges
Oh,
while
good
you've been
Lord.
writing the book?
Um,
Or do we need another episode for that?
we need another episode for that. No, honestly, the biggest challenge for me was, um, doubting myself, if
Mm,
that makes any sense.
mhm,
Um, there definitely, I mean, doubting myself and just having this love for flowers and you know, knowing about sweet peas and being able to teach about sweet peas and, share my story with sweet peas, but also just that little devil on your shoulder that's
mhm.
just like, you can't do this, all this kind of stuff, and just trying to talk myself out of that, um, and just really trying to keep my blinders on and believe in myself, believe in the process, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. It was by far the hardest thing that I've ever done. The hardest thing that I've ever done, um, is to write a book. It was so eye-opening, just the experience and, just all the steps and how long, it takes. But then, once I was connected with my publisher and got the contract and all those kinds of things, they're like, "Okay, so pub date is, February of 25." And I'm like, "That's 2 years away." And, it's here.
It
It's
goes fast.
so crazy how fast it goes, yeah. So, that was the hardest part for me, was the self-doubt and, just trying to, um, I don't wanna say talk myself out of that, but, it's just, um, yeah. I drank a lot of tea and ate a lot of scones and a lot of trying to like, channel my inner English garden, trying to write the book, lots of classical music. But yeah, it was that girl that didn't want to write a book report just wrote a book.
And look at you now. I appreciate your honesty with that. I think doubt is something that we all struggle with. My affirmation today, actually, that I wrote down on paper was, I can turn doubt into determination.
There you go.
And
That's
I,
perfectly said.
yes,
Perfectly said.
because the thing is that whether you're wanting to write a book or you're wanting to start a flower farm or you're wanting to take on a new challenge, every one of us has that doubt, that little devil, like you said, on our shoulder that's telling you, you're not capable of this, you're not worthy of this, you can't do this. But then at the same time, you look and see these other people that are successful. So for me, like I can say, Marryn did this, Marryn grew these beautiful sweet peas, look at her dahlia field. And you can also have the mindset, if she can do this, why can't I? And then you can empower yourself. And look
Right.
at you now, like 2 years, you said, went by in the blink of an eye, and you have this incredible book and this incredible gift for the flower world to enjoy now. So I think that's a really powerful story. I appreciate your vulnerable, I can't even say that word. I appreciate your honesty and willingness to share that
It was
feeling because, yeah.
it was hard. And honestly, now that you say that, it's almost the same scenario as when I left corporate America and started flower farming. It was, I felt like I was kind of on the edge of this cliff and I could, feel my toes, kind of dangling off the edge. And, was I going to jump or, was I going to stay?
Mhm.
And, it was kind of the same scenario. And so again, like you said earlier, just being very determined. I'm extremely determined when I get, something in my head. And so I just kind of had to trudge through that. And I think, it's part of the process, right? It's normal to have those doubts and those thoughts and kind of those feelings kind of creep in from time to time. And so that was the hardest part. I could write the words, I could teach it, I could, you know, share the stories and, share my love of flowers and all of those kinds of things. But it was that really kind of, there were days where I was just like, okay, but I'm glad I did it. I'm so glad I did it. And I, as soon as I finished, I did a video and I posted it on my stories on Instagram, and just tears just streaming down my face. And it was such, like, I closed my laptop and I was like, wow, that last period, like, on those TV shows where they're writing the end, I
Uh-huh.
feel like I wrote the end. And it was like, holy smokes, like, I just did that. I just did that. Now then it had to go through all the editing and all of that kind of
Sure.
stuff. But, just saying, putting that period at the end and just, yeah, it was amazing. So every part of the process has just been, one step closer, to getting it into my hands. So, you've got the digital versions and then all the editing and placing all the photos and, just all of those kinds of things and just step by step by step by step by step. And so, when people say that they've poured their heart and soul into, these projects, they truly have. They truly have. I mean, I gave every piece of me that I possibly could to this book. And I'm really proud of it. So
You
I can't
should.
wait for you to read it.
I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get a copy of it and have your signature on it. I purchased from your website, so I get your signature. I can say I know this lady,
Thank you.
and I'm so
I
proud
know.
of you.
Oh, thank you.
You said something there. You said that the process went so quickly. What seemed really daunting went really quickly. And I think that's so true of so many things. Like, we're always so focused on getting to the finish line, but there's this journey along the way. And I think that's one of the things that's so beautiful about flowers is they're fleeting and they're here for a moment. especially sweet peas. Sweet peas are one of those really fleeting flowers. So knowing that sweet peas only last for a short while, how do you handle that fleeting nature of what you're growing? And what does it teach you? Or what has it taught you about appreciating the moment?
So when I started flower farming, I mean, there was so much to do, right? So much infrastructure to get established. You've got all of the beds that need to be, put together. I mean, just all the things that need to be done. And I've just been go, 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 go for the last, 6 years, you know? And so this year, I actually gave myself the gift of time.
Mm.
And I allowed my most, this was by far the most emotional that I have ever been during the season. And it was because I allowed myself that gift of time to just really soak it all in, right? When you work so hard to achieve something and then you stop and you turn around and you look and you're like, I did that, and walking through the flowers and, not just running from one thing to the next, and, the beds are established now. Um, everything was planted. There wasn't a greenhouse to put up. There wasn't a well to dig. There wasn't, just all of these projects. And it was just me and my family and the flowers. And it just really, really brought into focus just slowing down a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and giving myself the time to enjoy it. Because and honestly, looking back, like, I lost my grandma in February of 23. And 2023 was a really hard year for me. That was actually the year that I wrote the book. And it was just a really hard season for me, just emotionally, mentally, physically, just going from one huge project to the next. And so in 2024, um, you know, I finally feel like I grieved her loss, if that makes any sense,
Mm-hmm.
and allowed myself the space to do that. Um, And so I would just go out there and just like, especially growing her sweet pea, right? Standing in the row with her sweet pea and, just allowing myself to feel that, that emotion and just how beautiful everything is, how important it is to really stop and take a look around and just soak in things. There's so much beauty just in nature in general, right? And it's
Yes.
so good for the soul. It's so good in any aspect of life, whether you're a flower farmer or not, or, whatever you do for a living, just allowing yourself the gift of time to slow down and really just savor those moments. Um, that was the lesson that I took away from, 2024. It was the first time that I'd really just allowed myself that time. And it was so important and it was so precious. And it made me fall in love with things even more. Um, it made me more it it made me more appreciative
Mm-hmm.
of what we've accomplished. And um, it's not just about checking off the to-do list. Those are important, yes, but it's not just about checking off the to-do list, allowing yourself, taking care of yourself, allowing yourself the space that you need. And, I get to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I get to do this every day. I think to myself, I get to do this, even on the hard days. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. So, yeah. So 2024 was a really good year, a really good year for me to, rest and recover and rejoice. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to what lessons we learn in 2025.
I love that. One thing that my coach has been talking to me a lot about lately is really valuing time and the journey, but being present. And one of the things we were talking about is how The thing that's so neat about flowers is to truly experience the beauty of the flowers, you have to be present in the moment. Like you literally have to stop and look at those flowers and make yourself present. And that beauty is fleeting. It's not going to stick around. So if you don't stop in that moment, you're not going to get to enjoy that. So I think that's so beautiful that you gave yourself that gift last year. And I hope you can find a little bit of time this year too.
Well, it's so funny because I was looking back at, you know, all the, content, that we, have to create and, share and all those kinds of things. And I actually, this year I took the least amount of photos.
Really?
Yep. Yep. And I was just like, wow. It was because I was in that, like you said, I was present in the
Mm-hmm.
moment. I mean, there were so many times that I actually didn't even take my phone out into the field with me, which I usually do. But I was just like, no, this is for me. This is for me. This is my time this is my morning with my coffee,
Yes.
you know, and, wanting to share and wanting to share the beauty of what we're doing and, share the farm and all those kinds of things. But also, just really kind of taking a little bit of my foot off the gas just a little bit and just, those special moments for me and for us as our family. And, yeah, it's fleeting. I'm watching my kids and they're just shooting up like weeds, and, uh, yeah, I mean,
It
I'm looking
happens
at my
so
age.
fast.
It happens so fast. I'm looking at my age and I'm like, holy smokes, when did we get, when did we get here? So it just goes so fast. It goes so fast. And this is the one life you have. And, I just want to enjoy it. I just want to enjoy it. So that's the, trying to enjoy it and share it and savor it and, just all of the things.
Yes. Oh, that's so lovely. And I'm so glad to hear that you're taking that time because you have so much going on with this book launch and so many people that you are talking to and appearances that you're showing up at with different book events. So I know we've talked well over an hour already, but I do have to ask you real fast. What is the one thing you hope people take away from your book?
Oh, wow. Um, the only thing that I want from my book is for more sweet peas to get out into the world. That's the only thing. And I want to inspire people. Um, I want them to feel like it's relatable, not just beautiful, but relatable. I want to be able to teach them, um, teach them to grow. And, I just look at it from the perspective of, you know, me sharing this book with the world, how many lives that's going to, just that ripple effect. And,
Mhm.
you know, teaching somebody to grow or sharing just, some few tips and tricks that, might change the way that somebody grows to be more successful so that they can share those flowers so that, that person can receive that bouquet. Um, and whether it's, taking somebody back to, their grandma's garden or, just making them feel better, on a bad day or, no matter what it is, just thinking about, you know, it's like when you cast a stone out into a lake, right? And you see that all those waves that are coming,
Mhm.
that's kind of, how I feel about the book. And, um, the biggest bouquet that I've ever made. No, I just, if in a flower reference, when you give a
Yes.
bouquet to somebody, it's the biggest. Um, yeah, I just wanted to share my love of sweet peas with everyone, and that was the whole thought behind the book. And I was just like seeing all these gardening books of, dahlias and garden roses and ranunculus and peonies, and you're seeing all these, flower books, and I'm like, why are people not talking more about sweet peas? Where's the sweet peas?
Mhm.
Everybody I mean, most people that I talk to, they have a story with sweet peas. Why are we not seeing more sweet peas? So, I got pretty determined to, it's like somebody lit a fire under me. And, yeah. So if there's one person out there that, this changes, they start growing sweet peas, or, they're more successful with them. That's my goal. That's my goal, is just to get more sweet peas out into the world. Whether that's teaching people to harvest their own seeds and getting more, seed growers out there, getting more flowers out there, or just something beautiful to put on your coffee table. Hopefully we check all those boxes. So
I love that. You're helping a new generation create those memories like we had as children. Hopefully we'll be that next generation that are telling our grandchildren about the sweet peas that grew in our gardens someday.
Well, and I feel like, they used to be more prevalent years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there's been an uptick in them lately, but I'm just like, come on, guys, this is like, let's create this movement, right? Like, let's get more sweet peas. I would love to see sweet peas in every garden, but yeah, they're just such a beautiful flower that deserves so much more love and attention, than I think they've been given. And, they're not just this common flower that have been grown in gardens for years. They're this extraordinary flower that's been grown in gardens for years, and they deserve to be celebrated. And so this book is my love letter to the sweet pea.
I love it. So tell our listeners, where can they find your book?
So Sweet Pea School is available for pre-order now. It comes out wherever books are sold. It comes out February 25th from Chronicle Books. And I can't wait to share it with you.
Awesome. And for those, I'm sure most of our listeners already know how to find you, but in case they don't, they can find you at
the farmhouseflowerfarm.com.
Perfect. And on Instagram, same handle, correct?
Yeah, the Farmhouse Flower Farm.
And we will include show links for all of those for your book and your website and Instagram there as well. And you also sell seeds on your website as well.
We do. This was our biggest seed sale that we just had in January by far. So let's keep the sweet pea craze rolling.
Awesome. And those in those warmer growing zones can put those in the freezer till next year.
Yes. Put them in the freezer till next fall or till this fall, and then start your seeds.
Perfect. Well, Marryn, it's always such an honor to get to chat with you. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. And like always, the door is always open.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me. It was really a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, flower friends, for joining us on another episode of the Backyard Bouquet. I hope you've enjoyed the inspiring stories and valuable gardening insights we've shared today. Whether you're cultivating your own backyard blooms or supporting your local flower farmer, you're contributing to the local flower movement, and we're so happy to have you growing with us. If you'd like to stay connected and continue this blossoming journey with local flowers, don't forget to subscribe to the Backyard Bouquet Podcast. I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment to leave us a review of this episode. And finally, please share this episode with your garden friends. Until next time, keep growing, keep blooming, and remember that every bouquet starts right here in the backyard.